Did you know that the word photography was formed by merging the Greek words for light and drawing? Me neither, but I do know that light is absolutely fundamental to photography. So let's dive into the 5 types of light you need to know to master your photography, starting right now. Hi guys, so you're into photography. So essentially that means you are a light chaser. Yes, light is absolutely fundamental to photography. It's what makes photography possible. So let's get a better understanding of what we are actually talking about when we are discussing the different types of light. In this video, I'm only gonna focus on ambient light. And ambient light is defined by that the light is not added to the scene by the photographer. But natural light can be super tricky and very unpredictable. So it's super important to know what you're looking for when you are chasing that natural light. As an outdoor photographer or travel photographer or landscape photographer, the whole purpose of waking up very early, walking for many hours in darkness to get to a location is because we are ultimately hoping for some amazing light at an amazing location. That combination just never gets old, and that's what we are chasing. The best conditions for that kind of photography is shooting around sunrise or sunset, also known as the golden hour, where the shadows are long and the light is generally more pleasing to the eye and there's more contrast. But we also need to understand that low light can be your problem. Golden hour is not always the right light for any type of photography when you're in the outdoors. Sometimes you can even get away with some banger photos in overcast light, which you will learn later in this video. So make sure that you stay until the end, where you will learn how to make fantastic photos even in broad daylight. The first type of light we're going to discuss is side light, which is when the light is coming from the side. No shit, Sherlock. As obvious as it sounds, it's also a rather complex type of light to use to your advantage. Side light is often thought of as very pleasing to the eye and a very big favorite in landscape photography. The side light often works best in those early hours of the day or around sunset, when the low sun in the sky creates these long shadows. Another thing to take into consideration with this kind of light is that it doesn't last for very long. So you need to be very focused, you need to be ready when the light is happening, because it can't be over in like 5, 10, 15 minutes and it's gone. So if you were not ready and you didn't have your composition right, you will lose this light and then you will walk away from the location without having nailed that composition or that photo. Here are some more photos using side light. The second type of light we're going to discuss in this video is probably one of my favorite kind of light, and it's probably also the most difficult type of light to master as a beginner photographer. There are 2 main challenges with backlight. There's the very high level of contrast, and then there's also a very bright sky. You'll be surprised how much detail you'll be able to recover in the post-processing in the details of the shadows. And you will also be very, very sad to realize how little you can dampen those blown out spots in your photos. But modern cameras have a very high dynamic range, so it's often not a big problem. What I do is that I tend to underexpose my images and then I bring up the shadows in the post-processing. Another technique you can use is bracketing. I rarely do it, but sometimes I do in a very, very bright scene like this one. I do take maybe 2 or 3 photos and I merge them together in post-processing afterwards. If the sun is included in the frame, everybody knows that sun flares or sun glares or whatever we call it, it is a part of the photo. You can try to take it away in post. Personally, I like sun glares, so I tend to leave them in the photo because I think it adds to the overall quality of the image and it makes the whole thing more authentic. A typical backlit photo will have a rim of light from the sun backlighting the main subject in the photo. In this scenario, make use of a silhouette. This will add a very natural focal point to a photo, and it will also introduce a very adventurous vibe. I mainly use this with humans, but it can also work brilliantly with other natural elements like a tree or a mountain. But keep in mind that simplicity is often the key to a striking photo using this technique, as if you fail to do this, the photo will often be too busy and it will be a confusing photo to look at, and that's exactly what you don't want. The combination of a strong form with a beautiful landscape just is unbeatable. Here are some more photos with backlight. The third type of light I want to discuss here is what is called front light. It's generally a type of light that I try to avoid, and it's difficult to make it work, and there are a few reasons why it can be very, very tricky to use front light. We've all tried this, being at an amazing location with the sun right behind you, the whole mountain face was lit up by the sun, and you get home and you look at those photos and you're just disappointed. It looks boring, it looks flat. Another super tricky and irritating circumstance with this kind of light is that you will often get your own shadow into the shot if the sun is very low behind you, and it just looks very amateurish, and that's exactly what we want to avoid in photography. You can of course remove the shadow in the post process, but it's sometimes very tricky and difficult. What you can do is like you change your focal length, so you zoom in a little bit and that will remove yourself from the frame. So my best advice in this type of light, if you are standing in front of a big vista or big mountain range or something, is actually to wait until the sun has set. That removes any possibility of your own shadow being in the shot. And then there's also another really incredible thing that will happen like 10-15 minutes after the sun has set. It will allow you to shoot what is called the belt of Venus. It's an atmospheric phenomenon that will happen right after sunset when a pinkish glow extends beyond the horizon. This phenomenon can produce some amazing photos even with a totally clear sky and no clouds at all. And if you're wondering what the blue color closest to the horizon is, it's actually the Earth's own shadow you're photographing here. Shooting at this time of day can produce some amazingly beautiful colors and some very rich colors that, of course, if used to your advantage, will produce a very, very beautiful image. Here are some more examples using front light. Okay, so now we've covered the three most common types of light that you will encounter when you go out into the landscape or into the outdoors. Either the sun comes right in your face, it comes right from behind you, or it comes from the side. Those three types of lights, as we just discussed, can be excellent conditions for photography. Now we're heading into the two last types of light, which are as many seen as the type of light that you don't want to shoot in. You want to avoid them. You don't want to shoot in overcast, boring weather. You don't want to shoot in the middle of the day in the harsh sunlight. But let me explain a little bit why these two types of light can be used to your advantage in some certain kind of photos. So let's head into number 4, which is diffused light or overcast light. I would actually argue that one of the best times for landscape photography sometimes is those overcast days with thick clouds and very soft light on the landscapes. This is quite contrary to what many outdoor photographers think, but I actually think that it can produce some amazing stuff. A lot of my favorite photographs has been shot in exactly that kind of light, especially in those moody locations like the Faroe Islands or Iceland or Scotland. That type of light is the ideal light. That moodiness and that almost bluish color that is added to the scene actually comes from light reflected off the sky, and that's why you have this bluish tint sometimes. The whole cloud cover acts like a big softbox, and that distributes the light evenly on the landscape, and that can be very easy and pleasing to work with. But I would also say that if you are not in some of those locations that I just mentioned and you're in a little bit of a boring landscape, then it can be quite tricky to make some interesting photography in this kind of flat light. Shooting an expansive scene in this kind of flat light can just be very unappealing to the eye and just look very boring. One huge disadvantage in shooting in this type of light is that you want to be very careful with including the sky in your photo, because the sky will often be the brightest part of the composition. Once in a while, it's okay. If the rest of the photo or the composition is dramatic enough, it's fine, but mostly you just want to try to avoid it. A season that especially benefits from this type of light is the autumn, or shooting fall colors. The red, the orange, the yellows that we love so much in the fall will actually be more intense in this type of light. Like this shot from the Yosemite Valley, which would not be as pleasing to the eye if the sun had been out and there was a lot of contrast added to the scene. But the good thing about this kind of light is that it will free up some creative space for you to work more on your compositions and not be hunting for the light, but be hunting for the right components in your photo. Then you try to look at the landscape with another set of eyes. You have to be more creative, and you have to look for those small details and stuff, which can also lead to some really, really amazing photography. We just forget that sometimes. Here are some more examples in overcast conditions. The last type of light I would want you to master is probably the type of light that you experience most of the time when traveling. It's actually called top light or just broad daylight. Shooting in the middle of the day in harsh sun can be absolutely... most photographers will tell you to not shoot in these conditions, just shoot in the morning, just shoot in the afternoon and the evening, and just throw away your camera in the middle of the day. I have another opinion on this. But first let me illustrate the problem with shooting in harsh, bright sunlight. The light here in the Swiss Alps in the middle of the day can be absolutely tricky. The contrast is super high. This means that the shadowy part of the photo will be very dark, yeah, even black, and the bright parts will be almost washed out and impossible to recover in the post-processing. The composition is not bad and the Swiss landscape is always beautiful, but the lighting is uninspiring and it will lead to disappointing results. But are there any circumstances where this type of light is actually the preferred kind of light? Yes, there is. This light is excellent when it comes to shooting around beaches and in general around water. Because in order to show the intense aquamarine colors of the ocean, you need a very bright overhead sun directly into the water. So in general, if you are traveling a lot in tropical regions, you definitely want to take advantage of the bright, harsh sunlight in the middle of the day to enhance that blue color in the ocean, which is super important to convey that tropical feeling. It can also be in a canyon where if you have a too low sun in the horizon, the sun will never enter this canyon and you will never get these sun rays or any type of light bouncing off the walls of the canyon. Let me show you some examples in which I photographed in the middle of the day in absolutely terrible conditions for many types of photography, and where I still feel the end result is very successful. Alright guys, that was the 5 types of light that I want you to understand to master your photography when you're in the outdoors. And remember that no matter the lighting conditions, there is always a type of light that you can use to your advantage. I hope this video helped you to understand how different types of light affect your photos. With all that said, thank you very much for watching in these difficult times. I'm not traveling and all my travel plans are cancelled for the time being. I'm staying in my studio. I'm focusing on making some nice content for my Instagram. I'm focusing on making some nice videos for you guys on this channel. So don't forget to subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for watching. Take care and stay safe.